Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Indie Game Movement, the podcast that talks about the marketing and business of indie games. I'm Andrew Pappas, and I'm going to be your host today, and we're going to be talking about communicating your game's vision to partners. Now, developers often struggle to clearly communicate their game's vision to partners, leading to misalignment, potential conflicts, and a whole slew of other challenges during development and beyond. So in this episode, we're going to explore how to establish and share a strong vision within your team, overcome common articulation challenges, and effectively present your vision to potential publishers. So today, join us as we uncover practical tips and personal experiences shared by our guests to ensure your game vision is understood and supported by all stakeholders. So that's what we're going to be talking about right here today on Indie Game Movement. Hey, everybody, and we're back. It's great, and it is great because we have Rob Bartholomew with us today. Rob, how is it going, buddy, and how are you doing?
Very well, thank you, Andrew. Very well indeed.
Excellent. Great to have you here. And folks, for those of you who aren't familiar, Rob, he's the product consultant for games, specifically Bartholomew. And you're also a studio advisor and board member, correct? Is it of that or just as a whole? Or, I mean, because I know you do a lot with this company.
Yeah. So I just started at the start of this year being my own kind of my own little firm, my own sort of one-person band consultant. And yeah, it pretty rapidly fell into sort of working in advisory roles for some sort of small and medium-sized studios and doing sort of one-off consultancy projects for some of the bigger guys around. And yeah, it's been really interesting. Huge change of pace for me.
Yeah, well, congrats on making that move and everything else. And, Rob's not just this guy who decided, hey, this would be helpful. I mean, he knows that, but it's also, he's got tons of experience in doing so. For example, he's been at Creative Assembly, the chief product officer for over a decade there. And then he's also been the European brand manager for Bethesda, marketing manager at Sega, Take-Two Interactive as the product manager there. So many different things. I mean, and what? You've worked on titles like, what was it? The Darkness, BioShock. There's, Total War Empire, some other Total War series too. I mean, there has been just so much that you have been involved with over the years. And I think, what was it? We were talking pre-recording that you've been in the industry about 24 years, right?
Yeah. I've had the real pleasure of working on a ton of games in that time, and from all sorts of sizes of release, from really big AAAs down to little GBA games and a bunch of sort of DS stuff in my early years. So yeah, I've had the pleasure of seeing a lot of the industry, but only sort of recently I've been involved in more of the kind of indie gaming side of the industry rather than sort of big AAA studios. So yeah, it's an interesting contrast between those big budget games and not so big budget games, and then the kind of indie gaming mindset as well, and how those kind of have their similarities and their differences. So yeah, I'm really pleased that my career's kind of spanned quite a lot of varied output, and I've had the immense pleasure of working with some incredible teams on some incredible games.
Well, it sounds like then there's also going to be lots of opportunities to work on other incredible teams and games too in the coming. And it makes me happy because, yes, they're indie. So great to hear that things are going well. And just to, sum up some other things too. I mean, you've done a lot in other areas too. I mean, you've gotten some BAFTA, Golden Rose, specifically the Design Award winner there. And you've done some talks too. Or I'm sorry, you will be, I think it looks like you will be on a panel for a live service gaming summit, which is in London. And that's coming up in September, I think the 9th and the 11th. So people, if you're considering going to the live service gaming summit that's in London, you should totally check out Rob's panel. If that's something that interests you, highly recommend it. But so all sorts of awesome, great things going on. But hey, when you're not doing all this stuff, what do you do to unplug? What do you do to relax? Is there a hobby? Like, what are some fun things that you get involved with, Rob?
Yeah, I think like many people who spend most of their time on phone calls and talking and using words and creating spreadsheets and PowerPoints and things like that, it's really nice to kick back and actually make something with your hands and be crafty or get involved in a bit of hobby time or whatever that might be. And for me, that's woodwork. I love doing. Putting bits of furniture together and taking on commissions from anybody who wants anything weird and wonderful made out of wood. So I've been learning that for the last 6, 7, 8 years or so, and just sort of trying to get better at that sort of thing. So I've made some interesting kind of weird and wonderful bits of furniture and random stuff out of wood for people, and that kind of keeps me engaged and helps me kind of wind down from the work stuff in the evenings and the weekends. And a lot of painting Warhammer stuff. So at CA, I had the great pleasure of working with Games Workshop for many years and making some great friends there, and was responsible for helping sign up and develop the Total War Warhammer trilogy, and it was a fantastic project to work on, but it kind of reignited a sort of a 13-year-old Rob's dream of having all the time in the world to spend painting and playing with tiny toy soldiers. So yeah, I really didn't need to fill the spare bedroom with a load of plastic and Citadel paints and scenery and things, and much to my wife's dismay, that's exactly what I did over the course of the last 10 years. So yeah, really embraced that kind of like teenage passion again, and yeah, I had a ball with that for all my time at CA as well, playing against the rest of the team. So yeah, anything that involves making stuff with your hands and not having to do it in PowerPoint is a fantastic way to wind down.
Yeah, and I absolutely love that, because I think maybe you can relate to this, but sometimes I find myself like, when you're working in such a creative space, but yet your strengths are in one area, not in the other. It's like, well, I still want to be creative in a different way, or outside of, like you said, on a spreadsheet or looking at a screen. So I relate completely in that sense of, well, what is something I can actually create, whether I'm using a pen or using my hands in some capacity, and just doing something that's very, there's that haptic feedback, because it's tangible. There's so much going on there. So love that you shared that.
It's about finishing it right as well.
Yeah, exactly, right.
But I'd spend much of my career working on stuff that's not coming out for another 5 years.
Yeah.
My most recent experience at CA as chief product officer is kind of working kind of almost 10 years ahead on some stuff and signing up deals and IP holders for games that are going to be out in many years' time and have life cycles that stretch into the decades, and that's that you don't get a lot of closure doing that. No. Certainly not now that I've moved on from the studio. It's a shame I don't get to see those things made. But if I can start, painting a bloodthirster first thing in the morning, and maybe I'll get finished by the end of Sunday, then that's great. I feel like I've got something to show for it. So it's nice to have a start, finish, and an end all in a sort of understandable time frame.
Absolutely. and it's such a it's a psychological thing too, right? I mean, well, I'm not going to go on a tangent, folks, but it really is to complete something or at least find a way to have closure. Super important. So glad you're able to find those things and scratch that need and desire for creativity, and also unwind a bit while you're doing it too. So that said, let's get to know Rob a little bit more by folks who, as you probably know, going through the Q box round. And for those of you who aren't familiar, it's just a series of some random questions we got for Rob here. I was bound to slip up with the easiest name ever at some point, which I did.
Whatever's easiest.
Okay, whatever's easiest. There we go. So Rob, are you ready for the Q box round?
Yeah, sure.
All right. Well, we got the gist of this already, but what's one habit to keep a clear and healthy mind?
Yeah, do something with your hands. I think that is the for me it's woodwork and Warhammer. But if you spend all day engaging your mind, then try and use the other side of your brain by doing something physical, whatever it is.
And I know at some point we should catch up, because I am a big fan of woodworking, and I'm sure we could share some projects that we worked on and all stuff. So, anyways, besides the point, awesome. Working with hands. Next is name one thing that motivates you every day.
Yeah, I think it was bloody mindedness. I think that I find like general kind of annoyance at the world and sort of self-determination to be a thing that kind of motivates me. I think there's a lot to be angry with at the world, regardless of your kind of situation, whether you're thinking politics or anything else. But I think if you can turn that into a positive force, if you can make that the reason that you jump out of bed, then you find it's a fuel that fuels you, that drives you and gets you up. So yeah, good old British bloody mindedness, I think.
I love that. Like, take the negative and put it into a positive. I mean, what can be better fuel source than that? Because I mean, some of us might feel there's lots of negative out there, and that just means if that's your belief and you're taking it to use it as a fuel source for the positive, then I mean, it sounds kind of counterintuitive or bad, but maybe it's good that there might not be an endless, or that there is an endless supply. But
Yeah, so it's passion.
yeah,
Anger is as much part of passion as love
you're
is, and if
right.
you can get on the right side of that, and you make sure you stay on the right side of that, then you can use it as fuel.
Awesome. All right. Last but not least, and the staple here on the show is, what game are you playing now?
Yeah, I'm circling around a couple at the moment that I just keep coming back to, and my main squeeze is RoboQuest from a studio called Rise Up. That I think a lot of people certainly their sales numbers have done well. They are really pleased with the results. I've had the massive pleasure of chatting to their studio head recently, and it's a fantastic sort of first person roguelike shooter. Keep rinsing, repeating, and trying again. Higher difficulty levels unlock your skill sets in the meta and various other bits and pieces. But it is colorful, it is fast, it is furious. There is a ton of content in there as well, and they've just done a big update as well. So jumping in now is something I wholeheartedly recommend. And also Nights in Tight Spaces. There's a demo available now for this follow up to Fights in Tight Spaces from a studio called Ground Shatter that was released, I think, almost 3 years ago now, the original. But Fights in Tight Spaces was sort of almost like a John Wick kind of style deck builder. Close combat game. If you haven't played it, you should absolutely play it. I've sunk hundreds of hours into that title, and Nights in Tight Spaces is their kind of medieval themed follow up, which is already looking really good from the demo. But I think they're looking at getting that out either later this year or earlier next year. So yeah, those would be my two big recommendations at the moment.
Awesome. Well, appreciate you sharing, and appreciate you making time for those games and having fun with them too. So thank you so much for going through the Q box, answering our questions. But now, folks, we're going to get into our discussion for today, which I said in the introduction, which is communicating your game's vision to partners. We all know the importance of, having a vision, but then how important is it to communicate that vision to others, especially partners? So with that said, let me ask you, Rob, why do you believe having a clear vision for a game is crucial for its success?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I think, as I mentioned to you when we were preparing for this chat, it's a big subject, and the way I tried to approach it was to be as kind of practical and as useful to smaller teams who are looking for funding as possible, because it sounds like one of those sort of slightly ephemeral, abstract kind of business academic things, but really it could be really useful to you as someone who's in a small team and trying to find a way of connecting with partners and publishers. And I think what really my interest in vision statements and my interest in how teams articulate themselves is really born out of one of the best parts of my job at Creative Assembly recently. And that was working with game leads, with art, with design, with production, and really trying to help them articulate what it was that they wanted to make. And it's something because ultimately I was very involved in the greenlight process. So how we got our projects funded through Sega, and a big part of those first initial hurdles was putting together the decks, which effectively pitched our games internally. So not a million miles away from how smaller indie teams would be looking for funding and investors and publisher partners. Anyway, we all have to do that kind of internally as a studio that's wholly owned by Sega. And it's important to understand where you're heading and why as a team, and getting a really consistent message from the outset, not only to make sure the whole team's aligned behind it, but to ensure that when you're presenting that to in our case, a big publisher owner who's going to be spending money on that concept, that they really know what they're getting into, and we're sort of justifying their investment faith in us. And again, very similar to what indie teams will go through with looking for partners. And really, that's not about telling the teams what to do. It's about helping them find that route forward, how connected they can get with their audience, how ultimately they can make it a kind of commercial reality so they can get that funding and get that project made. And there's a ton in that. There's a load of different sort of factors that kind of roll into that justification, of course. But it's something that at the very core of the fundamental heart of it really is to have this vision statement. And being able to clearly articulate that, what your vision is, it sounds like a relatively sort of easy subject, but it is hard, and some teams really sort of struggle with it. And it's not really well understood by the real broad range of people who might be coming together to create a game, and the real sort of benefits and why you should care about a vision statement aren't brilliantly well prioritized or understood by that team. And to be honest, I struggled a bit with it myself over the years. It's kind of at the wishy-washy sort of pseudo-academic end of business thinking that, I naturally reject and I'm suspicious of. You stray really fast into LinkedIn buzzword bingo territory really quickly with some of this. And there's tons of confusing overlaps with mission statements, positioning statements, strap lines, values, objectives, visions for culture. And then to add to that confusion, there's a ton of different methodologies for each. So you get a lot of dogma around what is and isn't correct. And if you Google, how do I write a vision statement, which, in broad terms, you really should, just to sort of read up on what people suggest. But you'll find 20 different ways of doing sort of the same thing. And really, the crucial part of this is that that's okay, right? Because your first realization when you're looking at a vision statement is that it should be that it's just a tool for you to use. See these things, these statements, these sort of business concepts as much less things that you have to do and that you have to intimately understand, and more that they are just tools to help you think and articulate and communicate. They all serve you, and you should use them how best you need them. So, really, a vision statement can have a bunch of uses. If you look up the textbook definition of it, it's about providing direction and focus, inspiring and motivating your team, uniting, communicating, enhancing decision-making. I'm reading these off now. Supporting marketing and branding, driving innovation and growth, framework for evaluation and measurement, aligning with core values and principles, attracting investors and partners. I would suggest that there is no set of words you can put together in a succinct format that could possibly achieve all of that. But, people try, and some people are more successful than others. But I would say that at its heart, what's crucial is that it should inspire and it should communicate intent. And if you can nail that, then 90% of your work is done, and you can twist it up from there to accomplish pretty much anything else you need to do. But I think your question was, why is it important that we have it? Why is it kind of critical for success? And really, it's just one of those fundamental building blocks of your business. It's kind of the elevator pitch. It's the first sort of sentence of your elevator pitch, if you like. You're going to get a prototype together. You'll hire staff. You'll do a deal. You'll build a culture. You'll make payroll. You'll set up an office. All of these things will come, and they'll come to define your business. But you've got to start somewhere without doing all of that first, so you can get the money to do that in the first place. And you need to be able to tell people, your team, your stakeholders, your potential partners, and eventually your customers as well, what it is you're aiming to do in a way that encourages them and allows them to get on board and join you in that belief, in that aim, just so you're all pointing in the same direction, just so that you can achieve everything that then goes on to make your business a success. So it's about inspiring, it's about communicating intent, it's about building excitement and expectation. And it's like saying, I or we as a business, as a studio, believe this. And if you can believe it too, you can come along with us as well.
I absolutely love that. There's like so much in there that you shared. And, folks, again, like vision, how Rob described it, how some of us may think it really isn't a lofty thing. It's that consistent message that you know and everyone else does. So they have complete clarity, intent, and excitement behind. And that's ultimately what it's doing. And those points and details you shared were so great, Rob. So with that said, I would love to discuss, establishing and sharing the vision, because we went into a lot of what that entails and such, or what these things are made up of. But what are, let's say, some of the really key components of a strong vision? Because as you outlined, there's a lot of things there, but what are some of the very distinct key ones that maybe some of us, if that sounded a little overwhelming, what are some of the focus ones we should really nail down?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. There's a lot of opinions. There's a lot of different methodologies, and everyone should be welcome to go and explore those under the proviso that it's a tool. It's something you need to use. It's something that you can use to refine your own thinking, and definitely approach it in that respect. If you, I guess is where I stand on the other side of the room from sort of more kind of conventional, sort of trained management consultants, if you like, and guys with MBAs, because they will quite rightly say something like, a vision statement should include goals, core values, something of the gameplay experience, a USP, a target audience. It's got to mention a story. It's got to mention your technical ambitions. All of these things, all these things I listed earlier. But I think a lot of that can come later. There are other statements, there are other parts of your pitch and your business plan that you can encapsulate that thinking in. I just always go back to this idea of, does it inspire and does it communicate intent? And, that's the consequence of me coming from a brand marketing background. I'm very much at the reductionist school of positioning. I'm a big fan of less is more. And a vision statement can ultimately be 2 or 3 sentences, but I like neat, punchy statements that don't lose people in a great big word cloud. And there's a definite risk that the more you put into a vision statement, the more generic and the more sort of self-descriptive it becomes, and you lose that inspiration. You might be communicating your intent, but you're not inspiring anybody anymore. You might be losing them. So I would sacrifice technically correct, academically correct vision statements in favor of inspiring and communicating your intent any day of the week. But it's better that you are memorable and you're exciting than you're scoring, full marks on your business school coursework. Because I think that's what you're going to be leaving people with in your pitch document and your partners and your internal teams. It needs to be something that is easily repeatable and people can grasp and belong to. And I think that's, we could do a whole other podcast on here's some good vision statements and here's some bad vision statements. Let's kick them apart. And I worried about using an example of a bad vision statement because, I always think they represent people's work. And if it worked for people, great. If it aligned your team, if it helps you communicate your intent, if it inspired people, then fantastic. So I asked ChatGPT to supply me with a vision statement for a game, and it said to create a visually stunning, deeply immersive fantasy RPG that allows players to explore a vast, richly detailed world where their choices shape their story and their skills are tested in epic battles. We aim to build a passionate community. It goes on, right? It goes on.
I need some guidance.
And I already lost you guys after the first sentence, couple of words, let alone the sentence, I'm sure. But it's fine. Those things are fine. They're okay. The more boxes you tick, the better for some people. But it's also the more forgettable and indistinct you get, in my estimation, right? So I think that I found Bungie's the other day for the new Final Shape DLC for Destiny. And whatever you might think of Bungie as a fan or Destiny or the outcome, I think the Final Shape has been really well received. And their vision statement for that was make the Final Shape an unforgettable Destiny experience. And that's quite nice and punchy and straightforward. It assumes a lot of knowledge. You've got to know what Destiny is. You've got to know what a Destiny experience is and what might make that unforgettable. But, they knew that internally. Of course, they know what Destiny is. And so when they set that vision, they were putting some good lines in the sand for people to understand the expectation and the intent around.
Yeah.
I was trying to remember back to when Ian Roxburgh, who is the the game director lead on the Total War Warhammer trilogy, when he and I were kind of talking about the first game and how we were going to turn this into a trilogy and what our kind of vision for it was. And we ended up somewhere around, I can't remember the exact wording, I should have kept it, but it was something along the lines of, presenting the entire Warhammer Fantasy world for conquest. Do absolutely everything we're allowed to do by both the IP holders at Games Workshop and by our fans, and how much stomach they would have for all of the Warhammer content we could possibly pour into it, an experience. So do the entire Warhammer Fantasy world was our vision. But again, that carries a lot of assumed knowledge about what Warhammer is, that we're making Total War games, but we don't have to necessarily go into all that detail in our vision statement. We need something that could pull the whole business together, that we could explain to Sega, that ultimately, we started talking about that in press and interviews to the fans as well, and just saying, look, we want to do everything, we want to do as much as possible, and we've worked really hard to kind of follow through on that.
Yeah.
And I did try and think of another example as well. And years ago, I worked with a studio called Headstrong Games, and I actually bumped into their then studio head at Develop in Brighton yesterday, which was great to see him again. But so it was slightly more at the forefront of my mind this morning when I was thinking about this than it otherwise would have been. But we worked on a title called House of the Dead Overkill, and it was a Wii light gun shooter game in the House of the Dead franchise, and in order to make it stand out from the crowd and do something slightly tangential with the franchise, we made a kind of grindhouse, kind of video nasty style version of it, and it went down really well at the time, and was a really good sort of solid entry into the franchise. But our vision statement for it was something along the lines of, they came for brains, you'll give them bullets. And it was almost like a marketing slogan kind of vision statement. And again, wouldn't really work outside of the context of knowing that we were making a House of the Dead Overkill game. But it just sold a lot off the back of the attitude. And it was a really useful kind of vision and kind of tagline for the studio to orientate themselves around and get excited by. Communicated a lot of that attitude, but it was quite abstract in of itself. So I guess I would say, the point of that is it doesn't have to live in isolation. It needs to be fit for use in front of your audience. It doesn't have to be all things for all people, really. So, again, the key components of a strong game vision for me are that it is inspiring and it communicates intent. It's communicating a direction, and context and it is everything. And that's the part of it you need to kind of understand and focus on.
Yeah. I mean, folks, sometimes we can overcomplicate things. And really what we got to think about is less is more. And when you're approaching things such as your vision, like, does it inspire? Does it communicate your intent and direction? So don't overthink. Less is more. Think about those things next time you come across your vision and how you're going to articulate and communicate that with others. So speaking of communication, I mean, I know that it can be a challenge to, especially within a team or an extension of your team or obviously partners. So what would you say are, some common challenges that teams face when they are trying to articulate their vision, even if they do follow, less is more type of mindset? Maybe they feel they have this dialed in, but it's not resonating. It's not hitting the mark where it needs to with all these, stakeholders, valid team members. So what are some of these challenges, and I guess how can they overcome some of them?
Yeah, I think the kind of thing I've seen sort of most commonly is being able to sort of articulate an aspirational, forward-looking, and exciting and inspirational vision. And that is tough because that is subjective, absolutely. But where I've seen it kind of fall over is that some teams are really steeped in what's practical and what's achievable, and they're thinking in terms of what can we do? What are we able to achieve? Are we worried about budgets, about timelines? Are we worried that our investor or publisher is going to say no to certain things, and they're kind of second guessing themselves and they're holding themselves back a little bit. And I think it's important that absolutely a vision statement should be realistic and believable, but it needn't be 100% attainable. It's got to be credible. It's got to be something that isn't utterly outlandish, but it's more about the direction you're taking. And what I see is some teams responding poorly to that kind of level of uncertainty, which if you're trying to encourage a vision statement to sort of bubble up out of a team's passion for a project, you need to be mindful of. It's some teams just respond badly to that idea of we're going to make the best game in the world style vision statements. Like, well, we can't because there's some really good games out there. Yeah, there are sure, but if we all agreed we want to aim towards that, then great, that becomes our vision, and we're making our decisions and we're progressing our game development in that direction rather than kind of restraining ourselves too much. So getting that balance right is really important, and also not really getting enough or not really having enough input from a diverse enough group when you're coming up with a vision statement. It's always worth getting additional help and different sort of views on what it is that you're doing. In particular, having an audience in mind for what it is that you're using that vision statement for. If it's your own team, great. If it's your own team and an investor, great. Does it need to be slightly tweaked between the two? That's fine. Is it one statement that can serve purpose for all sorts of things? Great. All of those things are fantastic, but just be kind of mindful of the audience that you're trying to put it in front of. And I've seen some vision statements that are relentlessly technical. They're really kind of deep. We're going to improve build times by 50%. Is that good? I guess that's good, but I don't know as an investor why I should necessarily know that. Can we blow that out a little bit more and sort of get our feet under us? So it's about understanding the audience, the context that you're placing it into, and not just making it a marketing slogan. I think my overkill example is probably a bad example because we ended up using that as a marketing slogan as well. But it shouldn't just be an empty marketing promise. It's got to be something that everyone believes in and ticks the right boxes for the purpose you're putting it to. And by extension, the other end of that scale is making it a product description. And I was hoping to kind of supply some sort of further reading links today, and when I was looking up various different articles and guides on how to write vision statements for game projects, all I saw or the majority of what I saw was a lot of examples of people just writing product descriptions. How many levels, what you do in a game, how fun it will be to be this character or that character, and really getting into kind of Steam product page text territory. So yeah, being mindful that you're just describing the game, not the vision for the game, is really important too.
Yeah, no, I think that last one's a big one too, because we at times get caught in the details. We focus on these things that we know are important, but they're not the only thing that's important. And just to summarize real quick some of those great points you mentioned, when you're uncertain, one, don't sell yourself short, folks, because that's not going to properly articulate your vision or where you want things to land, or where your goals are going to be. But also, shooting for the stars could be a bit excessive too. And it goes back to your point that you made before, is if you're doing that, does that align with your intent? Because if it's too short or too big, and like you said, finding that balance. But I think another great way to summarize all that is simply have reasonable reach. So don't sell yourself short, or don't know, we could definitely obtain this, because what if you don't? Now you're selling yourself short big time. Now what you knew was obtainable, if it doesn't become obtainable, is now you're in a bad position. And if there's somehow, and hopefully not, but a lot of negative energy around that, then we can, feel some people out there. But ultimately, folks, don't sell yourself short. Think of what that reasonable reach is. And like Rob said, have that balance. And it's not going to be perfect. No one's going to give you the right answer. You're probably going to have to figure it out as you go. But going too much on either extreme isn't going to help you or articulate that vision to others that can help you. Now, speaking about others that can help you, you mentioned earlier, we talked a little bit about publishers, right? So I'd love to start talking a little bit more about communicating with them and or other partners too, because there's lots of agencies that can kind of facilitate the same type of services or support, let's say publishers can have, or even consultants like ourselves or any other people that having that vision, that clarity can really make everybody win at what they do. So, with that said, especially when you're working outside of the team, what would you say are some effective ways to present your vision to partners? And maybe let's start with publishers specifically. We're courting publishers, we're having these conversations, and things are moving along, or what at whatever stage. What would you say are effective ways to present this to them so they have that clarity, so they have understanding of that intent? What are some examples or things that you can give us?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's you know, a lot of the benefits of being able to sit in front of your partners and communicate a vision nice and clearly are kind of what we've mentioned already. You know, to do with alignment and to make sure that everyone's kind of pointing in the same directions. And it's particularly important, I think, at the moment to have that kind of clarity. I mean, it always has been, but certainly at the moment where funding is a little bit more restrictive, to say the least. You know, really good options are few and far between, and publishers and partners are really looking for where they're spending their money to be, you know, well rewarded and to be safer and less risky than they have in the past by some margin. So, you know, having a good, clear vision statement really sort of demonstrates that you know what you're about. It's a statement that can communicate confidence and understanding as well. I mean, I don't know about yourself, Andrew, but I've heard from you know, people on the publisher side of the fence that they saw a really great game, or they saw a really nice team, but they're not really sure they knew what they were making, and they didn't come away from that meeting, that pitch meeting, with a really sort of convincing sort of statement of intent from them, I guess, is what they're always looking for. You know, well, this it looked like good, the tech looked good, the game looked good, but I wasn't really sure what they were selling me, and that's really difficult because, you know, you can see the amount of work that kind of goes into those pitches and the sort of the what's on the line really in those chats. So, yeah, I think really kind of involving your vision in your pitch is you know, an absolute must, whether you call it a vision statement or whether you sort of articulate in some other way at the start of your presentation. I think ultimately you've got to make some sort of statement about some aspirational statement about your intent, and that's got to be exciting to the person who's seeing it. And that really goes back and describes, you know, those fundamental components of that vision statement. So how you then build your deck alongside that, how you then go on to communicate with your publisher, should all sort of waterfall on from that point. So, you know, it's great to use visuals if you've got, you know, ripomatics or kind of mood videos or key art to support that, or you've then got statements or a bit of narrative, a bit of story, and then you start getting into how you're going to build the game or what makes it unique or how it sits alongside its competitors. All of these things just waterfall on from that vision statement. So if you've got your finished deck in front of you, you know, it's worth going back through it and checking to make sure that all the material you're providing does echo that sentiment, does reinforce that vision statement. None of it's at odds with or kind of clashes with it in a discordant way, because that's the kind of thing that leads to confusion. You know, in a partner or publisher's mind, they're going to look at that and go, "Oh, but they said this, and then they said this, and so which way round is it?" And the more solid, the more clear, the more reinforced the message they're getting from that pitch deck, the better. And it cuts both ways as well, right? So you want them to be excited about what you're telling them. You want them to be invested in your story, and you want them to leave the pitch session or the conversation you're having with them in a really positive mindset. But if they turn around and say, this isn't really for us, you know, that's good. That's a good result in a way. You know, it's not the best result, but it's absolutely important that you find out that partner is not interested in the kind of thing that you're trying to sell them on. Because then that saves everybody's time, and you are assured of their space in the market and, you know, how they feel about what it is you're proposing. So yeah, that clarity of that statement and being able to reinforce it throughout your presentation will hopefully lead to good things. But if it leads to a bad thing, then let's let that bad thing happen nice and quickly and be decisive and be for the right reasons as well.
Yeah, absolutely love it. So, folks, when you're having these conversations, when you're giving a pitch, when you're looking to work with these partners, or you are working with them, you know, make sure that intent is really dialed down. We want to avoid confusion as much as possible, and it can be a lot easier than we think sometimes, and how we can confuse people. And look, I mean, Rob, you provided some great examples, especially like, hey, look, these guys are doing an awesome job. The game looks awesome. The USPs sound great, and the team is great. But then I'm not necessarily certain where this stands, and that confusion, that conflict, and that could make all the difference in whether someone's saying yes or no to you. So, really calm down, as you said, reinforce that message, communicate it, articulate it in different ways. So therefore you can create that impact and be effective in how you present that vision to your partners. Such great stuff there. And then, with that said, I mean, are there any ways to maintain balance between your vision and, let's say, a publisher or even an agency for that matter, manage their expectations or feedback? Because I know sometimes it can be a difficult challenge. We talked about balancing a vision, especially in goals, but what if the vision doesn't necessarily align with expectations of these partners? What's a good common ground that everybody can to gather on and then move forward from there?
Yeah, I think it's a good vision needs defending, and you should feel comfortable defending it. But if your project needs funding, and you should generally be open to feedback in order to secure that as well, especially if you value and trust the feedback that you're getting from the publisher or whoever's giving it to you. You've just got to be conscious that you're not compromising that vision to a place that you're uncomfortable, you or your team are uncomfortable with it, and it doesn't become someone else's vision. And to be fair, no publisher will really want that. They will want to take on a game or competent publisher will want to take on a game that they've kind of messed with the vision so much that it's not one that's sort of truthfully held by the people who are making it anymore. But again, it's that sort of double-edged sword of double-edged blade of it's realizing that this game isn't for us. If someone's really trying to change the vision or disagrees with the vision, more importantly, then that's important to know, and that's great to understand, both internally and externally. Again, it's all about alignment and communicating your intent. And if you're getting too much disagreement with that, then that's worth something to you. It means you can either move on from that publishing conversation, or you can reassess what it is you're doing. Certainly, if you're hearing over and over again, this isn't great, doesn't fit with us, if you don't understand it, then that's probably a nice flag to re-examine what it is you're doing. But you've got to strike that balance between having the courage as your conviction and really being passionate about the vision that you hold, and being adaptable to outside pressures, whether those are market pressures or opinions or requirements of getting funded in the first place. It all comes back down to holding that vision securely enough, but not so securely that you never get your game made when you would have been ultimately happy with some concessions in order to make that happen. But I think, again, publishers are responding to well-held visions from teams that know that they can make what they're saying they can make, and are passionate about what they are making. And a vision statement can do a lot of communication on that front for you.
I absolutely love that too. And I think it's so great. A good vision deserves to be fought for. So when you're dialed in, when you have that level of clarity, you're going to know where you stand with that vision, and it's doing all the right things. So if you come across a situation where, it doesn't align, that's okay. You don't need to settle. But to your point, Rob, if you're finding a common theme where many people are, let's say, saying the same thing over and over again, then might be something that different elements maybe of the vision. It could be other components that relate directly to the project. But at the same time, at that point, it's good to have that balance or understanding to kind of get level out that field a little bit more, level out whatever your expectations may be, and understand what needs to be changed. But otherwise, I love that, because I think sometimes a lot of us may settle. We have this opportunity, and okay, there might be some compromises, but when are we going to get this again? And hey, it's a tough call. It's a tough situation, especially this day and age, but defend that vision. It's worth it. And there's ways to I'm sure there's ways to do it, probably another episode or something. but defend that vision. A good
Yeah.
vision deserves to be fought for. Love that.
It's crucial, yeah, absolutely. But being self-aware within that is absolutely important. We've all got to make ends meet, but we've all got to be sure of ourselves when it comes to art and creativity, and especially in this space, right? So, and it's the area where you see a lot of survivorship bias. You can point to auteur directors and game creators who are like, yeah, no one listened to me, no one believed in me. I was the only one who could communicate this vision, and I stuck by it, and then they made something incredible. And that absolutely happens. But for everybody who stuck by their guns and was successful, there's hundreds, if not thousands, of people who stuck by their guns when they maybe they shouldn't have done, I would lump myself into that cohort as well. Learning the idea of self-referential belief and understanding the context in which you stand and what's at stake is absolutely super important. But really important subject for sure.
Absolutely. Well, man, there has been so many good things that we talked about today. And quite frankly, I wish we had time to go more into them. Maybe we do in the future. But for now, we do have to come to a close. But before we do, I mean, in light of everything that we covered and discussed, do you have any tips, suggestions, or action items for people listening today based on what we discussed?
Yeah, sure. I think we could do a whole podcast on what here are some good vision statements. I don't think I've given you any absolute corkers today at all, but it's simply because they are so personal to the project you're doing. And again, context is very key, and what inspires and what motivates your team is hugely important. So I would say tip one is reading up, thinking really hard about it, set aside some time to work on it. And it's a crucial part of your business. It's a crucial part of what goes on to inform your design philosophy, your production methodology, your marketing campaign, how you interact with and select the right publishers and partners. So make sure that it serves you and it doesn't restrict you. It's a tool. Just make sure you're ready to use it, and you've set aside the right amount of time and space to think about it and make the most of it. And I guess the second tip is collaboration. Making sure that you're working with the rest of your team, but you're also using it as an opportunity to make sure you're all on the same page and you have got help from outside advisors, from friends, from experts. Get some diversity into that group, but know that you won't and you shouldn't please everybody or be all things to all people. I really liked I think it was Arrowhead's quote recently, or they've probably got it on their website still somewhere, that a game for everybody is a game for no one. And I think that's very true of vision statements, and sort of values in general. You've got to be really careful about trying to make everybody happy with a vision statement, because ultimately it's going to make it generic. It's going to weaken it. And it is, we didn't really speak about this, but a vision statement is a fantastic opportunity to get alignment in your team and to understand where you have dissonance, where you have kind of competing opinions. So use it as a crowbar to leverage those difficult conversations. And really, that's tip 3, right? It will ask you to take tough decisions if you get a strong vision statement and everybody in your team is behind it and inspired by it, and you take it out to partners and it starts seeing some combat. It's gonna ask you to make tough decisions. It's going to challenge you on the direction you're taking, and who you're ultimately working with, and that's a good thing. It's going to reinforce those beliefs, and it's going to challenge those beliefs. And do not be afraid to confront those tough decisions. Don't put them off, because the later on you adapt your vision, or you're kind of wishy-washy about the sort of subject of it, or it's a bit sort of nebulous. You haven't quite nailed it down yet. If you get into sort of full production, you don't have a clear vision of what you're doing, then that will come back to bite you and bite you hard. So don't be afraid of those difficult conversations that it suggests, and absolutely kind of nail down that vision nice and early.
Yeah, and I love that last point too, because I know we've used the term clarity a lot in this episode, or even in probably previous episodes, but that one says it right there. Having the clarity isn't about just not just having a clear direction, but because you have that direction, when you're in a situation making those tough calls and you look back, and if you know you're dialed in with that direction, with that vision, then when that tough decision comes up, it makes it, at least I would say, a lot simpler, probably. Maybe not easy, but it can make it a lot simpler to make that call. Maybe emotionally you don't want to, or any other things that may happen. But like you said, Rob, that clarity will definitely help with tough decisions. And when you're making decisions fast and effectively, you're more likely than not to push forward, to grow, and everything else. So such great tips and follow-ups, like so many great things, and such a great summarization too of our conversation. Rob, I can't thank you enough for being here today. It's been so exciting, and really love the depth and details that you shared with us today. So if any listeners want to reach out, find out more about you, please, what are some links or ways that people can connect with you?
Yeah, I've got a little website called bartholomew.com, which I'll make sure you've got the link for. So please do check that out. I've got some case studies for how I've helped some studios there. But really, I'm very happy to chat through any kind of issues or kind of questions anybody's got about better positioning themselves for the current environment with publishers and investors. It's definitely tough out there. We thought it'd be getting a little bit better by now, and it isn't really. I think we've still got some time and some stormy weather to see through in the games industry just yet. And but there is investment out there. People still want to make games. They still want to release games. It's just made it a little bit harder to make that a reality. So yeah, really interested in helping people through that process. I'm really happy to talk about any of the subjects we've raised today, and specifically helping any team articulate their vision so that it can survive contact both internally with their own teams and externally with publishers and partners, and ultimately their audience as well. So yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, absolutely. Because you're right. It is tough out there. So folks, if you would like to reach out to Rob to talk, chat, whatever, one of the ways you can do is bottleandwood.com. And LinkedIn. You're mostly active on LinkedIn, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. You can find me on LinkedIn quite easily.
And of course, these links will be provided in the show notes. So any questions you want to reach out to Rob, that's where you can do so. Or his name's pretty easy to find. Well, use the links in the show notes there. That's going to be easier, because we were talking earlier about how to spell your name, your last name. So, all right. Well, everybody, thanks for tuning in. And Rob, especially, thanks for being here today.
Thank you. It's been a joy. Cheers, Andrew.
Hey, everyone. Thank you for listening to another episode of Indie Game Movement. I'm Andrew Pappas, your host, and the show's producer is Mustafa Price. Show notes for this episode can be found by visiting rengenmarketing.com, the number episode of the show. Rengen Marketing is a consulting marketing company that helps indie devs with their marketing efforts. Whether you need guidance with your game's marketing strategy or could use a free marketing plan template, then please visit www.rengenmarketing.com and take action. A special thanks to Dakota Saw for Season 2's opening theme and Melissa Gellis for the new logo design. And as always, thanks for being such great listeners, and we'll see you next time on Indie Game Movement.